Now, to discuss Nigeria's identity and revisiting the Indigene-Settler question, we're joined by Ayokunle Fagbemi. He's a doctoral fellow of the Institute for Global Peace and Conflict Management, as well as a senior fellow at the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. He also wears a cap as Executive Secretary, Center for Peace Building and Socio-Economic Resources Development. That's a lot of caps.
Multiple caps
Thank
tonight.
you so much for being on the news tonight.
Good to have you.
I mean, a lot was said at that event today. The Nigerian Constitution recognizes citizenship, but we see that we live in a society where many rights and opportunities still depend on being an indigene, where you're from, and not as a Nigerian. What do you think are the drivers of this debate, indigeneship and, of course, citizenship? Why has it persisted?
Interestingly, I was the one that delivered the keynote address at that meeting. And I guess your reporter decided not to feature
because
me
you're going to be here.
Because I'm going to be here.
Yes.
One of the few things we need to understand, and as Nigerians, we must be delivered from Western hemispheric prescriptive agenda. When you want to discuss the subject of citizenship, a citizen has rights, duties, and obligations. But you as a citizen must have a root. You must have a base. You must have evolved from somewhere.
Right.
And so, anyone who is attempting to discourage us from keeping the indigeneity clauses the way they currently are is not ready to help us to achieve what is called integrated national development. If our key, and that is why you'll discover that the international community has moved from the Millennium Development Goals to the Sustainable Development Goals. For you to achieve any of those, you need to understand that human relationships are very key, and that these human relationships is basically a demand on me or you to accept that I have an identity, you have your own identity, and I must mutually respect you as I engage and interact with you. And that your rights, duties, and obligations end where mine begins, literally speaking. And as such, when you want to discuss the issue of indigeneity and citizenship, particularly the residency rights, that is a major concern of some of the proponents that are trying to confuse all of us. When you look at it, you must understand that for effectiveness, any discussion on how we become properly identified as citizens of a country must be citizens-led, and it must be rooted in the historicity of that geopolitical space and the people that are therein. Nigeria has been very unfortunate that we've gone through the colonial experience, and it was a colonial experiment of attempting to bring people together that were trying to understand themselves. In Nigeria, we either had empires like Kanem Borno Empire, we had the Benin Kingdom, Ife, Ibadan, Ekiti, Egba, and interestingly, the British colonial lords entered into separate treaties, pacts, and arrangements with all these entities. So by the time we were being fused together in 1914, none of those instruments have been abrogated, none of those instruments have been repealed till date. And that is why you keep on having this Western hemispheric.
So what are some of, I mean, so that we can, I mean, I wish we had all night to go down, you know, historical lane. But if I hear you correctly, in your, you know, as soon as you started your intervention, are you saying that the idea of expunging state of origin is a bad idea? Because there is the argument that there is a need to elevate national identity above subnational loyalties. Like in the case of Rwanda, for example, after they went through, the genocide and all of that, they decided that, look, what we need to do is to say we are all Rwandans, or Rwandese, if you like, and not Hutu or Tutsi or whatever tribe. Isn't that where we need to begin from, to begin to really define what it even means to be a Nigerian?
Now, for you to say you are a Nigerian, that means your ancestry comes from the people that inhabit Nigeria as out of 1914 and thereafter. And by independence, you can trace your identity to that date, and you retain, and you have not lost by legal means, that citizenship. But you are still located to a particular indigenous aborigine space. However, if you are now talking about you moving as a migrant, internal migration, intra-Nigeria migration, and you want us to continue to relate, it must be mutually respecting. It must be such that we will have to permit ourselves to appreciate the fact that the resolution of this citizenship and identity questions in Nigeria can only be achieved when we commence the journey of the abrogation of those instruments I mentioned earlier on, and then we now say we are cutting off from them, and we want to now begin to appreciate the milestones that we have achieved in recent times.
Do you want to name some of these instruments that we need to abrogate very quickly?
Everything about the 1914 proclamation of amalgamation must be abolished. We must have a legal instrument passed by the National Assembly indicating that. Because if you do not, you will continue to have these interventions and incursions that distort us and will not allow us to evolve ourselves. Mind you, some of us are products of third generation cross-culture marriages. We are not celebrating those things. We are products of people who have been resident in other cities and jurisdiction other than our places. So when you're talking about this subject matter, we must be mindful that we want to build an integrated Nigeria, that you are talking about sustainable development. If you just remove the state of origin, you remove the fact that I'm Yoruba, ideally, but my Yoruba-ness and the Yoruba-ness of my children and my grandchildren is already being lost. Because if I married an Igbo woman, and for 35 years counting, and my own father, who is an Ekiti man, married an Ibadan woman, you'll discover that I cannot stricto sensu, and I've been resident in Abuja in the last 37 years.
Okay, great. Mr. Fagbemi, we need to wrap up. We've been told to wrap up. But I need to ask you, because the critics of this argument is that what they say is that with this indigenship over citizenship, we now have a country where citizens have varying rights depending on where they come from. In recent times, I don't know if you came across an appointment in a particular state in the north. I believe it was Bauchi State that made the round. And some 3 individuals appeared on that list for employment. And they were rejected because they said they were not from the state, and so they do not qualify. That's the kind of society that we have. And that's the argument. It's no longer about...
What we need to start talking about is merit and inclusion.
Regardless of where
you come from. But mind you that you cannot remove being a Nigerian. You are first and foremost a Nigerian, but you must have the qualifications. It is unfortunate that we are not discussing these things into details today. And part of what we said earlier on, and my presentation there today, is that people should not allow us to, because of wanting to spite ourselves for intra-Nigeria migrations, open a window that will allow for extra Nigerian migrants to come and distort. And when they
Right.
do distort, and that is what we are currently experiencing
Okay.
since 2009, that we're having all these security breaches.
Mr. Fagbemi, it would be nice to have you back so that we can, you know, discuss these issues even at length. You know, for somebody like me, it's very important. My father is Igbo, my mother is Efik, my son is Yoruba. So I should be the face of Nigeria. Thank you so much for
And those are
joining
the
us.
things that ideally we should be celebrating.
Talking about,
really.
yes. Ayokunle Fagbemi is Executive Secretary, Center for Peace Building and Socioeconomic Resources Development. Thank you so much for joining us.